It does. Some of us been back to work for a while.
Some of us
Yeah,
never stop.
I noticed the midnight oil's been burning a lot in your office there, Mr. Herrick.
Okay, we are streaming.
All right, we're ready to go then. Good afternoon,
Yeah.
everybody, and thank you for your attendance here at Committee of the Whole for June the 8th. The agenda has been circulated. Is there anything anyone feels they need to add to today's agenda? If not, I'll seek a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Burns, seconder.
I would just like to make sure that we make sure that the location is changed to Zoom meeting on all of these.
Picture looks even worse.
I'm getting a lot of feedback. Do you think it might be wise to mute yourself unless you're actually speaking? Getting a lot of feedback. So I'm sorry, but I never heard anyone second the motion to accept the agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Reinders. Thank you very much. No objections? All right, so you can see the agenda is up now on the screen. And our first item is fluoridation, and this update is from Mr. McDonald, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't go into too much of the background because we've been through this a number of times before. But basically, the SOAR has made the request to the Amherst Town Council to add fluoride into the drinking water. And council passed a motion directing staff to hold a plebiscite during the municipal election, and that they had no official stance on the issue and decided to ask the residents to educate themselves on the pros and cons of the issue. Last month, we spoke about the issue, and there were two main concerns at that time. One is the ability to hold a plebiscite in the county in order to get the county water utility customers on board to be able to participate, as well as the process in itself and what a public meeting would look like during the like in the digital environment. So staff got together, and we are now recommending that we simply survey the customers of the utility. Where the plebiscite is non-binding, conducting a survey would really, the end result would be the same. It would just be a different method. What we would propose would be we would distribute the survey in the July water bills, which go out very late in July. It would include a self-addressed stamped envelope where they could answer the question that we would have put in the plebiscite, which is in your package there. And it just simply states, should the town of Amherst fluoridate the municipal drinking water supply, yes or no? We would include in that a one-page document that outlined the SOAR request, the financial information, the capital costs, as well as the operating costs. We would encourage the customers to educate themselves, and then simply the question. And again, I just want to reiterate that because it's non-binding, holding a plebiscite or a simple survey, there's really no difference in the response we get, because, or what we would do with the response, at least, because it's non-binding and the council can make any decision they want. We're simply, gauging the interest in this issue from the customers of the utility. So with that, I think I've covered everything I needed to articulate, and if there was any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Does anyone, Deputy Mayor Christie? You're muted, Deputy Mayor.
Not used to this yet. I was just wondering, Jason, if it's just the utility water bills that are going to be responded to, there is a whole other population of Amherst that is not going to be participating in the survey. And I'm just wondering if that's as fair an approach as it would be if it was, what the original decision would be about doing it at election time. And if it's not binding, does this have to be rushed to do right now? I'm just wondering, I just don't know that we're going to hit everybody we want to ask if it's only going to water bill holders.
Right. So the plebiscite would have been everybody eligible to vote, whereas the survey, the way we're proposing it, would be everyone who has a relationship with the water utility, a direct financial relationship. They're actually a customer of the water utility. That could be an issue, but really what we're trying to do, in my opinion, and it might not be what council's opinion is that we're trying to gauge the interest in the community for fluoridation. It's not a vote. So if we don't ask every single person, it may not be as big of a deal as if it was a binding vote. We're simply gauging the interest on whether or not the community is interested in adding fluoride to the water. Those people that do own multiple properties or rent out properties, we could encourage them to ask the tenants what their opinion is as well. And that way that, they can gauge their tenant's opinion, and because they would get multiple votes, if you would, right? If you own a property that you live in and you have a water bill, you would get a survey to give your opinion. And if you owned 1, 2, or 3, however many apartment buildings or commercial properties, you would also, get a bill and a survey asking your opinion on each of those. So there is the
So-
opportunity for them to get feedback from their tenants.
Okay, and I guess the other part of this would be, if it's only going to be asked of the people who are paying the water bills, would the initial cost of 60,000 plus the 25,000 per year be added to the water utility, or would that be on the main
It would be 100% of the water utility.
water utility?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to, I guess, address some of Deputy Mayor's concerns, is there an opportunity to drop mail at these apartment units, multiple units that basically don't pay for the water but use it? Again, it's a little broader reach. I don't know, it's just an opportunity or a thought process there that the apartment units, whether it be Billy Langell's or West Fix or the ones on Dickey Street, wherever, try to capture as many people as possible by a mail drop.
I think that is technically possible to do a mail drop or to do a delivery. I haven't gone through the pros and the cons and the issues that would be surrounded in that, as far as returning how many, if they could be photocopied, if what have you, and who actually gets it, if you just do a mail drop. At least if it's addressed to somebody, it's officially sent to somebody, as opposed to a mail drop that could be put in the flyers or just left on the property. So I guess I don't have a full a full thought on the pros and the cons of that.
Your Worship, I have a question for him too.
Councillor McKenzie, yes.
Okay, so like say on this topic, so why don't we set like a chaos, like a little thing in town hall when people come in, and have like a little like a survey with their name, where they live, their phone number, and maybe say, if you rent, because people that have concerns with this, we'll have the guys or the girls that are very strong against it and very negative against it, and they may not be a homeowner or may not be paying any bills. So what if we set something up at town hall? If you have concerns, come down there and set it that way. There eliminates, going to put stuff in people's mailbox at the rental places. Because I know I own a rental building, and they're not. If I send them a piece of paper, they'll never fill it out. But if they have concerns, they will go to the town hall and fill something out, and that'll save us a lot of mailing out things and not getting things back. But if they have a concern, either way, they will come down and fill out the survey.
Mr. Harrod, did you want to comment on that before Mr. McDonald answers? Mr.
Yeah,
Harrod,
3 days.
hands
There,
up.
okay.
There
Yeah,
we are.
I did. Thank you. Just that current situation we're in, we hope to open town hall on a limited basis, very limited basis, sometime next
Yeah.
week. I would hesitate to recommend a plan that drove people to town hall, to be honest. So just throw that in, that's all.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and I, you know, I agree with you too, but, yeah, I don't know, it's just a suggestion. Maybe if there's a way we can leave a survey outside, a mailbox with a pin, they can fill it out outside and we can pick it up, you know, they can throw it in the mail slot and then we don't need to touch it for 24 hours. I know they do that at the car deal, at the auctions. So when we drop a registration off, you leave it in there for 24 hours and then you touch it, or however long we want to do it. But, and same as when we pick checks up, they put it in the thing and then we have to pick it up after so many hours. I'm just trying to think of different ways around it, Greg, you know, but, you know, get everybody's opinion on it.
My question is,
Go ahead, Councilor Andrus.
my question would be to Jason. Jason, the trailer parks, when they send out a water bill, does that just go to the tenant and the other people don't get it?
It goes to the owner of the trailer park, of the mini home park.
That's what I thought. So they wouldn't have a vote.
For lack of a better term, yes. Yeah. Yeah. They wouldn't receive a copy of the survey.
Right. And to me, that's very important because there's a lot of trailers.
It's obvious that there are a lot of challenges in trying to effectively get the survey to all of those who are affected by the decision. And there doesn't seem to be an obviously good solution forthcoming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the issues, you know, like with regard to the kiosk, you know, obviously in the COVID situation, you know, bringing people to town hall is an obvious issue. The other concern that I had with it is we have to in some way be able to not identify, but be able to track that people aren't filling it out 15 or 20 or 500 times, right? They would need some kind of a unique identifier that didn't identify them, but we're able to ensure that people only provided their opinion one time.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. So that's what I mean. That's why I'm saying you put your name, where you live, and your phone number. You know what I mean? That's the only really, because we don't want to kind of have somebody up there policing it all the time. You know what I mean? And I agree with you, Jason. And that's why I'm saying address, phone number, and their name.
Deputy Mayor Christie.
I just kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit. The reason that we're kind of really going away from doing it as part of the municipal elections is because we had Cumberland County residents who are also using the water utility. And that's kind of where we're, you know, stepping away from that and doing it more, you know, trying to get it under the water utility bills. So what if we went back to the original plan of having it as just an additional question at the election? So every voter in town, regardless of where you lived, if you're a voting age and a resident of Amherst, you have a chance to voice your opinion. And if we are going to do a mailer, then it's only the mailers that go out to the Cumberland County residents. So it would reduce significantly the amount of money and that's required. We'd make sure that those only went out to those certain individuals to be surveyed, which would be very insignificant compared to the total base. And then we would have a good comparison of all. And then we can make you know, an informed, educated decision on what the taxpayers want, as well as the people that are using the utility outside of our boundaries.
That might not be a bad idea.
Certainly, it certainly works.
Yeah.
Certainly works.
Okay.
Clearly the costs, just if I might, Your Worship, just to clarify, the
Yes,
costs,
go ahead, Mr. Harris.
the costs always were just for the utility. They were never intended to be hit the tax rate or be part of general operating. The costs have always, and no matter what the situation is, will always be borne by the utility. In terms of, you know, I just say that just to, because Deputy Mayor, you had said, you know, the taxpayers will be able to decide, which is fine. The the only wrinkle there is the ratepayers of the water utility that would bear whatever the cost is. But I think the plan is workable. Just
Yeah.
clarifying, that's all.
I understand that, Greg, completely, but
Mm.
everybody who's in an apartment situation currently or in a smaller community type home could be a homeowner at some point, and hopefully would be. It's just that, the decision they make now is going to affect what happens to the water supply of Amherst long term. So I think
Certainly
it's
could,
fair
yeah.
that we ask all of the taxpayers and then ask just strictly those who are outside of the town boundaries who use the utility for their input. And again, I understand that this isn't, we have to go with what everybody's saying, but it's certainly going to give us a much better data to make an informed decision for the town.
Sure.
Yeah. And I do agree with that too, Mackenzie.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor McKenzie. Is there any disagreement with the newest suggestion of Deputy Mayor Christie? Counter argument?
Just a point.
Yeah.
Mr.
We're with the plebiscite, we're back to the requirement for a public meeting. And I think we'll just have to do our best in terms of maybe even include it as part of the June council meeting or something. I'm not sure exactly what, but we'll have to just do our best in these times to be able to produce some sort of quote unquote public meeting, which is the requirement under the act, but we'll just figure it out.
Okay. All right, so
If I could add one other thing, Your Worship.
go ahead.
I think it might be prudent to if this is with regards to to the hybrid model, I'll call it, asking the county if they would prefer to try to organize up their own plebiscite for their own residents, or if they would want to have the utility survey the residents.
I have an opinion.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Harrod.
So if we ask the county to hold a plebiscite properly, they will say, well, you're going to have to share the cost of the election with us. I don't think we should probably put ourselves in that situation. We can do one of a couple of things. We can say, hey, municipality of Cumberland, would you like to survey the water customers that are in your jurisdiction somehow? Or B, we can directly reach out to the water utility customers. So with what the deputy mayor suggested, I think we'd maybe send a courtesy note to the county and make sure they knew what we were doing, but write directly to the customers. So then you've got two pieces of information. You've got the results of the plebiscite, and you've got the results of whatever the mail-in is from the county customers, and then the council of the day will just make their decision based on that.
I agree.
Yeah, Councilor Byrne, I see your hand up, and then Councilor Jones.
Just a quick note there that given that we're now back to the plebiscite and supposedly the October election, is there any rush to have the public meeting in June as the CAO has suggested? Or could we not wait till September to see what the current health requirements are or health restrictions and have it then? Just food for thought.
Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is to Mr. McDonald. Didn't we already approach the county about including this in the election?
Yes, I've had a couple of discussions with Mr. Ferguson at the county, and the ability to do that. And then, I also talked, my last conversation with him was let's hold off and wait until after the results of this evening's meeting to see which way that our council wanted to go.
So secondly, I think the best thing to do is follow what Deputy Mayor Christie's suggested. Surprise, surprise.
Right. Well, all right. Do we need a motion for that from the deputy mayor as part of process here?
Good worship.
Councillor Reinders.
Terry,
Sorry, Councillor Reinders, you have something to add? Go ahead.
If this council took a stand and voted yes or no today, which way they wanted to do it ourselves, could we do that? Backtrack? Instead of having a plebiscite and everything? Mountain did it.
I would suspect that, yes, we can, but we, through discussion in the past, just determined we wanted to get public opinion somehow. And now we're just working on how to go about doing that. But I think it's certainly, Mr. Harrod, correct me if I'm wrong, it's certainly within the right of council to make the determination.
100%. Yes.
Thank you. I mean, if we're doing a survey or a plebiscite or a little bit of both, the hybrid, they're non-binding. It's ultimately going to be council's decision. Councillor Reinders.
Yep.
So it's our decision regardless.
Right.
So if we continue with the idea of trying to get as much public information as we can, process here, do we need a motion to develop that hybrid of suggestion of the deputy mayor? Mr. Harrod, can you?
So just, I do. So just in terms of process, we already have a motion on the books to do the plebiscite. I'm not sure that we've approved the question yet. That might be one little governance issue that we've got to tidy up, but I don't think we need an extra motion to tell us to have the plebiscite because we already have that. We might need a motion to approve the question. We probably would want to get a direction from the committee of the whole to say something like, in addition to the plebiscite that the water utility survey by return mail customers who are outside the boundary of the town of Amherst. That would be sufficient enough direction to go do that second part. We may have to have a motion of council to, we probably do have to have a motion of council to approve the question that would be asked at the plebiscite. That's something that could easily be done at the June meeting of council, I would think.
Okay. So for the point that you made regarding the survey of the county consumers, Deputy Mayor, would you care to make the motion that we need?
Yeah, I'm just making sure I'm not on mute here. Yes, I will make the motion that we carry on with the plebiscite as well as survey additional water utility customers within the Cumberland County who use the water utility at this point in time, and that we bring it forth to council in June to be approved.
I'll second it, Mackenzie.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or further discussion on this?
Yeah, I have a
Councillor
question.
Jones,
You have
certainly.
an
Councillor
amendment?
Jones, is your hand up for a question or you just didn't turn it off after the last one?
I didn't turn it off from the last one. Sorry
Oh, all
about
right. Thank you. Mr. Harrod then.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just process, that's all. The Deputy Mayor's motion said, and that we bring it back to council for approval in June. So just a couple of moving pieces here. All that really has to come back for council to approve in June would be a question. Do you want to fluoridate the water supply or not? That sort of, you approve the question for the plebiscite. So is that what you meant?
Yes, sorry, I should have specified that because the question will have to be voted on by council, correct?
Yep.
So that we will bring it back for the council to approve the question in June.
So that's already on the books. I guess that's kind of where I was going. We're kind of, anyway, I think we're okay. I just wanted to make sure you weren't expecting a report in June on the survey of the the county customers. That's
No,
all.
absolutely not.
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
okay.
Okay.
All right, so to be clear, the motion was to survey the water utility customers who live in the county, not in town, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Howard, is that
Could
what
I,
we're
could I,
seeing then?
could I suggest a wording? Would that be all right, Deputy Mayor?
Sure, go ahead. We're
Sure, go
obviously
ahead. Yeah.
struggling with how to
Thank you.
put it.
So that in addition to the plebiscite, that the water utility survey by return mail customers who are outside the boundary of the town of Amherst with respect to fluoridation of the water supply.
Okay.
Is that all right?
I'm fine with that, and I'm
Thank
just going to make the motion to accept the wording as presented.
Okay.
All right, and Councillor McKenzie, you're still willing to second the motion?
Yeah, for sure.
Fair enough. Good. Any other questions about this or further discussion? All right, I'll put it to a vote. And again, as per usual in this type of meeting, I'll ask for nay votes. Hearing none, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Our next item is the user fee policy. Our CFO Rector, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The CDR is in the package. I'm just going to highlight a couple items. So the user fee policy that was approved at our last meeting said that the HST was included in the ice rental rates, and it should have said that they were rates before HST. This was an error by staff in amending the policy, and it was never the intent to have the rates include HST. This policy change now is simply to correct the grammatical error. Also, the header was removed, stating that the rates were for ice time. So we're recommending that council forward the correction to the user fee policy for fiscal 2021 in regards to the HST application for ice times, and to insert a header that was removed stating the rates for ice time to the next council meeting for approval.
Thank you very much. Somebody care to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Sorry, who was that? Councillor Byrne. Okay, thank you. And a seconder, please.
I'll second that. Counselor Jones.
Councillor Jones, thank you. All right, are there any questions or discussion? I see Deputy Mayor Christie's hand up. You're still on mute, Deputy Mayor.
Yes. Shelley, there's just a point of clarification, and it's just strictly for my understanding, nothing more. I'm just not sure what the header being removed, the header, what exactly does that accomplish?
It just to make it clear in the title that it's for the ice times. That's all.
That it's for the ice time only, like you could rent the stadium otherwise, but
It's a different thing if you're renting
Yeah.
for other purposes.
okay, I just
For
wasn't
the- for
following
the
what the
ice time.
header had to do with it, so that's great, thank you.
All right,
I have a question about the taxi license.
all right. Ask your question, Councillor Reinders.
Yeah, I sent a paper in quite a while ago, and I think the taxi license are awful low at $25 and taxi license $10. And I just can't remember exactly what the price I had, but I think Mr. Harrod might be able to remember.
So, thank you,
Mr. Harris?
Councillor Reinders. Really kind of two separate issues. The user fee policy sort of gathers all of those amounts from different places and puts them in one policy for ease of reference, and that's what we've done here. But the taxi licenses amounts are set by the bylaw. One of the issues that's yet to be completed is a review of the taxi bylaw, and you and I did talk about some of that, and the Chief Pike has the taxi bylaw on his plate, and I know he's done some work on it. And he's asked me at least once for Councillor Reinders' input because he knew you and I talked about it. And so that work isn't done yet. So it's a bit of a separate issue, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know.
Yeah.
All right,
So
any,
we haven't ignored the information you've sent. Just haven't
No,
gotten
no
it to
problem.
council yet. Yep,
right, so it's not part of this motion then.
it isn't. No.
Anything, any other questions or concerns about this motion? Then I'll put it to the vote. Any nay votes? Then it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Our next item is grants to organization. And again, Ms. Rector, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has the information in the package as well as copies of the applications which were provided in a binder format last week. We do note that there were many applicants who submitted requests prior to the COVID-19 state of emergency. And so we did have a bit of a process to reach out to see whether or not people were planning to proceed with their events or not. And those who canceled their events have been removed from the list. So the spreadsheet that's in the package shows the remaining applications based on categories. So we have a within policy category, an events category, an athletic or sporting event, and then an other. We also note that we include a fresh start just to show that it is there more for information purposes. And then we have the grant for poverty amount as well. So I know that last year we did move some amounts into the grant poverty category as they seem most fitting in this category. So Nova Scotia Community College, the amount for Maggie's Place, the community Christmas dinner, for example. We've added information related to the financials that have been submitted. It's new this year. So you'll see that there's columns that show equity position restricted and then notes and other funding information. So we've provided that this year. It's not something we had last year. So just wanted to bring that to council's attention, information that will aid them in their decision making. I also note the fifth column in is information showing recommendations per the policy. And the next column is the council award column. So that's where we're going to actually put in the amounts based on our discussion today. So I also want to note that this year may be a little different. So part of our discussion will include whether or not there's any conditions attached to the funding for those that might be events or activities that are still dependent somewhat on the restrictions that are in place right now. And so I want to make sure that we get that clarity as we're going through. Our plan today is to kind of walk through the different line items. Sarah's going to put up on the screen the chart, and then we're going to fill in as we go along. I'm just going to wait until we're in that position.
Yeah, I'll stop screen sharing and Sarah can take over. Okay.
Great. So as you can see in the first section, this is the policy section. And we filled in the council awarded amounts. So there's $500 for the Amherst Little League Baseball Association. There is, sorry, $1,500. $500 for the Little League T-ball baseball. Autumn House is $10,000. The Cumberland County Museum is $4,000. The Cumberland Early Intervention Program is $500. The Food Assistance Network is $2,000. The Senior Safety Program, $6,500, and the Sexual Health Center for Cumberland is $500. Those are the amounts that were in policy last year, so we have filled those in. And so I'll ask council if there's any questions or discussion on those items first.
Just one I have. The Cumberland County Museum. Will they be operating this year?
As far as I'm aware, they are operating, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Byrne, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I note that there's 3 summer programs that were money put aside. We're still not sure if they're going to occur, Little League, T-ball, and early intervention?
So my recommendation is that if we award those amounts, that we award them with the condition that the funding only gets given to them if they proceed. So it's conditional funding on the events actually occurring.
Okay, should we yellow those in just for simplicity's
Sure.
sake? or-
Sure.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in that section? Okay, we'll move next to the events. So the Amherst Community Christmas Dinner is listed here in the events. Last year, we did move it down into the grant for poverty. And so we should probably have that discussion. The amount of the request for this year is $3,000. We did not receive a balance sheet for this organization. I just wanted to note that because in our policy, we do ask for financial information. The MADD Cumberland Tantramar, you'll see that one is postponed until October. And again, I think that's one that's probably conditional on the event occurring, that we're still in a position and the restrictions have been lifted enough for that one to happen. The Multicultural Association of Cumberland, again, there was a multitude of items in their request. And we had looked at the amount, the maximum amount based on the things that could happen, being around $1,634. However, we didn't get financial information, and so we're within policy. It would be $1,000 would be the max that we could give. The next two items is the Nova Scotia Works CANSA and the Tantramar Community Radio Society, and these amounts were events that happened in last fiscal year, so we're not recommending any funding for those in this year. So that's that category. Again, happy to answer any questions that council may have on those items, or open the floor to discussion about those items.
Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. If my memory serves me correct, the Multicultural Association of Cumberland County, did we roll that in last year with under Maggie's umbrella?
No, we gave them a separate award.
We gave them a
Last year.
separate one, did we?
Yep.
Okay, my mistake. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Christie.
Just a couple things. Shelley, when you were talking about moving the community Christmas dinner down to poverty, and that was kind of what I had emailed you about earlier in the day. Are we as council deciding what category they go in, or is that something that happens at staff level?
So last year we had the discussion at council, and it was in the discussions with council that we moved it down into the poverty.
So why would it not be in the poverty category starting out this year then, if that?
Yeah, that an error. It should be moved down.
Oh,
to
just an
poverty.
error. Okay. I was just wondering if it was going to be another discussion. And I guess the other thing is it really clearly on the application and followed up with these groups that are asking for financial assistance that we do require the financial statement, and that would definitely impact what their award could be?
So we sent a letter out when we changed the policy last year, highlighting specifically those revisions to the policy to all of these groups. And when they apply, they are let known, and we have called and followed up with them as well. So staff have called and followed up with them, letting them know that we require the information.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Shelley, you mentioned about the 3,000 for the community Christmas dinner. Is that what they're getting, or we haven't decided yet?
No, they have requested $3,000, and
Okay.
last year we gave them $1,500, but according to policy, we did not get full financial information. And so staff is recommending per policy. Our recommendation can only be based on policy. that $1,000 would fit within the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Shelley, have they been, I guess two things about that. One is, have they been made aware that without providing financial information, they're limited to $1,000? And two, given the nature of what the public health are predicting for a second wave in the fall into the winter of a second wave of COVID, is their event likely even be able to be done? And therefore, should we put it again in yellow as if maybe it won't happen?
Yes, I believe any of the events that, we have no way of predicting if any of these events are going to happen. And so I think anything that's event related has to have a yellow on it and say that it's conditional on the event actually occurring. Again, we have sent letters out to people explaining the policy and what the policy means. I don't know, I couldn't swear that we've been specific about what the amount would be or how much we could give them, because that's of course a decision of council at the end of the day. But certainly we have informed via letter when we change the policy, what the policy states and what the changes are to the policy and the potential impacts of that. So we did do that last year. Again, staff, when we received the applications, many came in without the supporting documentation, and staff have worked hard to call all of those people back to get the information. And that we do require it per policy.
Okay, I just want to be sure, because you don't want to see them underfunded because they just didn't know what they're supposed to do. And I know you did due diligence. We just need to be on record. Thank you. Okay. I don't see anything else. Shelley, if you want to continue.
Okay, so let's look at the Amherst Community Christmas Dinner. We've agreed that we'll move that into the grant poverty, but let's talk about the amount. So I have on here a recommendation of $1,000, and I'm just looking to council as to whether or not they have a different perspective or not.
Deputy Mayor Christie, I see your hand.
I'm saddened that they didn't send in the financials, because I would have loved to have been able to give them more. So I'm going to, propose we give them the max under the policy without the financials, which would be 1,000 in this case. And hopefully going forward that we can have, people that can submit all of the financials, so we can give the awards that we feel are, above that limit as well. So 1,000 would be what my vote would be for the maximum without the financials.
Okay, and we're highlighting that in yellow, conditional on the event actually occurring.
I agree.
Thank you. I see Councillor Jones has his hand up.
Yes, Your Worship. I was just going to agree with Deputy Mayor Christie again. $1,000, like if we change it for the Christmas dinner, because they didn't send the finances, and then we're going to have a problem with someone else down the line. But I noticed it in their budget or assets they had a profit of $900 and some odd dollars. So they're going to start off with almost $2,000 anyway before they get the other donations. That's all I have.
Okay.
I think, Your Worship, if they need it and they come back, that we council the day will certainly help them out.
Okay. So do we have consensus then that 1,000 because of lack of financials is the maximum, and that's what we're proposing? Does anyone have a differing opinion? All right, I think that 1,000 is the number we're hearing. Back to you, Shelley.
Okay, so the MAD is, they're asking 500. We gave them, per policy, we can give them $500. Again, this would be a yellow one, conditional on the event actually occurring. And I'm just looking for whether or not council agrees.
Yep, I agree.
Yes.
How about any differing opinions? No? Fair enough. Continue.
Okay. The Multicultural Association of Cumberland, again, it's a financial statement issue. So we would say $1,000, again, conditional on the actual events occurring for them as well.
Differing viewpoints or questions? None? All right. Sounds like 1,000. Carry on.
So the next one is the Nova Scotia Works Kansa. We're recommending 0 simply because it happened in the last fiscal year. It's a prior event. And so if anyone disagrees with that, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's not a recurring event.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the same thing with it.
Can I say something?
Oh,
Mhm.
certainly.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing because it was a past event, but could they have, because we always have a little bit of mad money set aside for grants that are after the fact, could they have at the time applied for a smaller grant through the town? I'm just wondering for information purposes for people because they don't always know what they're gonna do
Mhm.
by the deadline.
As
Just
an
wanna make sure
interim
that
event.
they- Yeah, that they understand that that is also something that's available.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make that point, but unfortunately, this was a past event, but if people find themselves in that situation, there are other ways of at least applying through the town, so.
Okay.
Okay,
And the Tantramar Community Radio is the same thing. So that finishes that category. And that takes us to the Amherst Valentine Run. So again, this one, we didn't receive the proper documentation. They're stating they don't have financial statements. There was a handwritten summary of the revenue, but it doesn't show the full amount of the revenues. And it does have a statement at the bottom that the monies are given, they give monies to other organizations, which is also not compliant with our policy. And so we're recommending that we don't give any funding for that event based on policy. Happy to answer any questions or looking for anyone who agrees or disagrees with that.
Well, on this policy question, there's not an awful lot that we should be able to dispute with that position. They have to follow policy or they're not eligible.
Right.
So is there anyone with a differing opinion than not providing them any funding this year?
The only thing I hate to see them turn it down because they have about 200 people, but they should have followed the rules. That's the worst part.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yep, it's one of them things.
So the next
This
one,
is- This is a well-established, Your Worship, this is a well-established organization. They have done it now for the last 7 years. So they should have a handle on what's to take place. I'm sorry, but if you don't follow the rules, you don't follow the rules.
Right.
Okay, and I have all faith that the town staff have thoroughly communicated that situation to them, and if they can't provide the information required to meet the policy, they unfortunately aren't eligible. So is there anyone differing from the opinion of no funding for this year? All right, thank you. Continue
So
on.
the next
Shelley.
one is the Fundy Youth Soccer Club. They're looking for $800. Again, this would be one that is conditional. So it's an end of season event. If soccer's canceled all season, there would be no banquet. So the funding would be conditioned on the restrictions and the event actually being held. And per policy, we're recommending $800.
Okay. Any questions or differing opinion? No? Sounds good. 800 it is.
So the next one is the Cumberland County Transportation Services. They're looking for the purchase of a vehicle. We were able to get some stats, but not specific for Amherst, more the Amherst area. So they are looking for money to help fund a vehicle. You saw the information in the application. We felt that this was a decision that was left up to council for consideration.
Well, I think they do good work. it's a cheap way for us to support them, the 5,000.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Christie?
I was just wondering if that's something else that should potentially go under poverty or not.
Certainly leave that to council if they feel that that's applicable.
I'd like to support them in some way, absolutely, because a transit system is needed here in this area, and it comes up time and time again during our poverty advisory meetings. So I would support doing something to help them out. This is a one-time thing to do with the vehicle, but if we had something that, we moved it down to poverty, it might be something that we look at going forward with other initiatives or partnerships or something like that for to have it written in policy at some point down the road. So I just wanted to make that point.
Very good. Councilor Jones?
Yes, Marcia. The CCTS, they do a wonderful job for us around town here for the low-income people, and people need to get to doctor's appointments and that. And I think we should support them with the $5,000 for a new vehicle. You can't get very much transportation for that kind of money. I think it's a $29,000 vehicle they're looking at, and 5,000 is just a small price. If we need to get their active stats on what they're getting from Amherst, the number of ridership from Amherst, and if they don't know how to separate it, then maybe we could have one of our window staff show them how to capture that figure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm hearing at least 3 people supporting 5,000. Is there anybody with a differing opinion? No? Then I guess 5,000 is the decision. Thank you. Continue, Shelley.
Okay, so the next one is the Fundy Winds Marsh. They're looking for $500 for spreading gravel to upgrade the trail.
Your worship, if I could. I need to personally get down there and have a look at it. I've been hearing such fantastic things and things I've seen on social media that it's getting a lot of use from our elementary schools as well as kids in the area. And I think it's a wonderful thing that if they develop it more, it's just going to grow and grow, be a great asset to the children and youth in this area. So I gladly do the 500 for sure.
Councilor
I
Jones?
agree.
Oh, Councilor Reinders, thank you. And I see Councilor Jones has his hand up.
Yes, the Fundy Wind Marsh mission. I guess there's a lot of good stories about it, how well they're doing. But then we have a discussion that being in the county. And the second thing I want to mention is in the package, there are 2 applications there from Fundy Wind for $500 each. One on the 27th of February and one from the 8th of February.
The 8th.
Shelley, do you have an answer?
I'm just looking to see. I believe there's only the one.
It does look like 2 here as well.
Your worship?
Mr. Harrod.
Not 100% sure, and we can certainly check the details. I did approve a grant early in the year to the Fundy Winds project under the authority that I have in the policy of $500, and I sent an email around to council at the time. So that may be the confusion, and that certainly was prior to the fiscal year end. So, but we can.
So it
certainly
appears
check on
we're
that.
just looking at one single $500
right.
contribution.
That's correct.
All right. Anyone
Dave?
have a differing opinion?
No, I have an opinion there too.
Okay.
And
Councilor
one of
McKenzie.
our- Yeah, like I say, for $500, like I say, our schools are using that a lot. So, you know, if it's helping our kids in our community, I think $500 is, a great value. So I'm for it too.
All right. So are there any, I don't hear any differing opinions? Then 500 is approved. Thank you. Shelley, carry on.
Okay, so our final two, we go down to the grant for poverty. So Maggie's Place, we included $10,000 last year. And that was supposed to be for a youth center. So we don't have final information on that. They were carrying last funds forward to develop something over the next few months, and then we ended up in the COVID situation. And so I just wanted to make sure that council was aware of that they are still working through a plan for that. And again, I feel that if we're going to give the 10,000, we should have some conditions attached to that grant related to having a plan developed for the youth center part of it, because that's why we had given them the 10,000. So.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Okay, I have a complete different recollection of how that conversation went. I know there was some talk about the youth center, but there was also some talk about when we came to the grants that there was a couple of applications. One was for, if I recall properly, eating with dads or dads learning to cook. And then there's a second program, and we kind of went back and forth about, is it really up to us to tell them how to spend their money? Because we kind of looked at something that was like Autumn House and just as important to the community that I believe it was Councillor Blanche and I that brought forward that we should have them as policy for $10,000 and let them decide how to use the money, that it wasn't really tied into a youth facility at that time, was my recollection. But it was just going to be 10,000 for policy, and that they could decide how they wanted to use it, if they wanted to save it for a youth center or they wanted to put it towards some of these other programmings that they were looking for grant money for. And I do see in the application this year, they specifically say a youth center. So that's fine if what they're planning on, what we already have set aside for policy of $10,000 for youth center. But I don't think it should be contingent on what they spent their money on last year, because my recollection of that wasn't that it was tied to the youth center. Now I'm going to go back and go through the notes, and I kind of went back and forth with some today just to make sure. But I just want to, that's kind of where I'm at. I just want to give them the $10,000. They're an organization that is needed in this town, used by so many, ties into our poverty objectives. And I think it's up to them how to spend the money, as long as they comply with all the policies that we have set forward, as far as, not giving money to other organizations and the financials and that sort of thing, rather than it being contingent on a youth center, which we need, but that's up to them to decide how they're going to fund it and go with some of their funding partners within the community. So to me, I want to give them the money, but I don't want to make it get contingent on that. So
Certainly the wishes of council. I just want to, during our meetings last year, our notes were that it was contingent, and the letter that was sent out did say that the funding was to partially be used around providing stuff for youth. So that is in the letter, that they were going to work towards a youth center.
But it wasn't for a youth center or providing programs for youth.
I would have to get the letter, Deputy. I certainly will send you a copy of that.
Yeah,
after
just for my own information, and I have absolutely no problem giving them the 10. In fact, I wish we could give them more, but I know we fought hard to put it into policy last year for the 10,000, which I think was a great move. But I just don't want to make it contingent on it being used for a center, because the facility is used by so many and for such a very good cause and wide variety of programming and things that really benefit this community, and especially those who are struggling at certain times. So I just want to make sure that they have the money and that they decide how they can use it. And if it's for a youth center, then absolutely 100% will be on board. But I just don't want it to be contingent on that. And that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Before we move on to other councilors, did you have a clarification, Mr. Harrod?
Yep, thank you. So certainly, council's prerogative to approve funds, however they see fit. But if you'll recall, and as the deputy mayor pointed out, how she wants to see the funds allocated this year, and that's certainly council's prerogative. But it's my recollection as well that the money was for the establishment of the youth center. You will recall that there was an approach by the folks at Maggie's Place. There was a discussion about the use of the innovation center. There was discussion about the establishment of a homeless shelter. There was a discussion about the establishment of a youth facility, different buildings, and the solution, as I recall, or the compromise, however we want to describe it, as we recall at that time, or as I recall at that time, was to provide them with money for that. That is my recollection. Again, that doesn't affect council's prerogative to change that for the current year, but that's how it was communicated to the organization for sure.
And Mr. Harrod, I don't disagree. We did have many presentations, but in my mind, it was 2 separate things. One is the community grants applications that they had for their programming, such as these food resources and cooking. And then a separate one was for a separate ask of potentially using town buildings or the town helping out with a youth center. And the discussion, as I recall, and I mean, there was lots of discussions around it, was rather than giving them a couple of $1,000s for a couple of working program or cooking programs, that we would write them into policy so that they were guaranteed the $10,000 every year as part of policy. And then it would be up to them to use the money how they saw fit. And if they wanted to save some of it or all of it towards a youth center, or they wanted to do some for programming or whatever, that's kind of where I got to the decision in my mind, is that rather than giving them a couple of $1,000s for some programming and then look at a youth center separately, that we would do a larger amount as policy, but it wouldn't be tied to anything that we decided, that it would be up to them to decide how to spend their money. So that could be a misunderstanding on my part, but that's kind of where I got to my decision on that.
Respectfully, that's just not my recollection, but that doesn't mean that I'm 100% right either. Respectfully, that's not my recollection. Look, I know that there was some back and forth between Maggie's Place and the town about how to use the funds that had been allocated and whether to put some aside. And yes, I suppose we can go back and have a look at that, and council can change it however they wish. But my clear recollection that it was a compromise about the youth center and some money to help them establish it. That's my clear recollection, but again, respect.
And I mean, we both could be kind of viewing that a little bit differently, but that's fine. But my point, I guess, that I'm trying to make today is I want to give them the 10. We should give them the 10 as part of policy. I just am not sure that I want it to be tied strictly to a youth center, if it's from now going forward or whatever. Because of the amount of programming they do specifically for some underprivileged people in this town, which is much needed. So
my comments were just about the backward. Going forward, it's council's prerogative for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, there's a couple more hands that need to voice their opinion, so I'll call on Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Your Worship. My recollection from last year was everybody that had a chair at Maggie's Place had an application in. And when it was all said and done, all the money was going to Maggie's Place. So we were a little confused. And I even see this year the Multicultural Association, which is addressed at Maggie's Place. The Sexual Wholesale Center it was at Maggie's Place. It may have moved by now. And there were a couple of other programs last year that with a different name and a different person, but basically they all ended up at Maggie's Place. So yes, there was a $10,000 ask, and if memory serves me correctly, somebody had suggested renovating, and I could have been the basement of the library for a youth center. I could be wrong, but we were challenged last year as to where the money was actually going and who was getting it. But at the end of the day, I believe we all agreed everybody's chair was located at Maggie's place. So I do have an issue giving them $10,000 when, especially if they can't comply with the requirements of financial information for multicultural. I'd certainly like to see some more financial information and where their funding is coming from besides the town and where it's going before I would agree to a $10,000 donation. Thank you.
Okay, I see Counselor Jones.
Yes, Your Worship. As I look in the package and read Maggie's letter, which they sent to Jennifer February 18th, she notes in it that they were happy to report regarding the common support grant of 2019 received by Maggie's Place amount of $10,000. They used $2,655 of that community support grant to affiliate the programs and purchase food and supplies and provide some transportation. But they also noted the remainder of the $10,000, $7,345, will be shown as deferred revenue until a designated space for youth is secure, and this money can be used to set up the space. I thought the space they were looking at was the old library office in the basement of the town hall. So what are they going to do? That's the question. Thank you.
Okay. So I've heard some very differing opinions on how this should be. Can we get more information and put this decision off, or do we need to decide today here, Shelley?
Certainly, I can get additional information and bring it forward to council for next meeting if you would prefer to do that.
Yeah. And I think the council has their heart in the right place. I mean, this is a wonderful institution that does some really good things, but we're talking about a fair amount of money, and we have to follow, due diligence that they are acting within our policies and dotting the i's and crossing the t's, as it were. So I guess I have to put it to council. Or do we want to put the decision on their funding off for to give staff a chance to get back to us with a little more information? Or does somebody want to make a motion to approve the 10,000, whatever you see fit, councilors?
Mackenzie, Dave, if I say something.
Yes,
I think we
Councilor
should check it out.
Mackenzie.
Yeah, I think we should check it out and see what they need the money for, because, we're giving our taxpayers money away. So it's best to have, if we have the proper thing that we're giving it to, then I'm okay with it. I'd rather check to see where the money's going. And like you say, it is a great organization, but we still have to look out for our taxpayers' money.
All right, thank you. Now I see hands here. Councilor Byrne, is that new? No? Mr. Harrod, you have your hand up? No?
I'm okay. I'm okay, Your Worship. I'm fine.
All right. Deputy Mayor, your hand's a new one.
Yes. I guess I just want to clarify with everyone, if that's what the decision is, it's certainly not my decision. It's certainly not one that I'm supportive of. But what is the point of having it in policy if we have to do this every year? Like, we have all of these other ones. And that was the point of transferring it into policy. Like, we have so many that, food assistance programs, senior safety program, Autumn House, Little League, that are in policy, that the money is set aside every year specifically for that. And that was the point of putting them in policy, so that they had the 10,000 every year, rather than having to apply for all the individual events that they were going to do throughout the year. And if you recall, in the past, we had given them, 2,000 here and 4,000 there and whatever, for various individual events that they were having. And so the discussion was put them in policy. They're guaranteed the 10,000 a year because of the significant programming they do in this town. And if you're not familiar with the programming, then maybe you should be, because it's amazing what they do. And I think that the 10,000 is well spent on vast majority of people in this town, our taxpayers, as well as people that really need it. So if we're not going to do it today, I would be, disappointed in that. But if we're not going to do it today, I definitely want us to be able to review, come back to this as soon as possible, because I know that they are a program, they run programs that are dependent on financial assistance. And if we're not able to give that to them, especially in the midst of COVID, with all of the things that have gone on and the people that have been most vulnerable, they've helped out in this community. So I can't be any more passionate about that. I don't know if I can say anything more, but the whole point of putting them in policy to me was that they are getting the 10,000 every year, and that they are responsible enough and established enough and do such good programming for this town that they deserve it. So I'll have to go with the vote, but that's where I stand.
So,
Dave?
Mr. Harrod, do you have a clarification on Deputy Mayor's point?
I do, just a very brief one, just reading the
Then you
policy.
go ahead.
Thank you. So just reading the policy, and the policy does say that support for these organizations and the amounts are reviewed annually. So there's no, there isn't a dollar figure attached in the policy per se. It does say it requires an annual review from council, just to your point, Deputy Mayor. Just clarification.
Yeah. Right. Councilor Byrne, you have your hand up again? No? All right.
Dave, I have something to say too. Mackenzie.
Go ahead, Councilor McKenzie.
And like I say, I know we're giving them 10,000 every year, but if the value was only $500, like the Little League or some of the other organizations, then I wouldn't have a problem. But when it's $10,000, and like I say, they do great programs for our town and stuff, and they help our town a lot. But you know what, if they're doing all those programs, it should be easy for them to give us the, accountability where the money's going. And I support them 100%. And I know, Sheila, where you're getting at, but I mean, it's the value. If it was $500, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But when it's 10 grand, that's when I like to have people accountable. And that's my opinion on that.
Very good. Councilor Byrne? You're still on mute, Councilor Byrne.
Thank you. As a point of reference, I guess, the poverty grants were funded from the deed transfer tax. Am I correct?
That is
And
correct.
if so, do we have enough in, I guess, our slush fund or our poverty fund to actually provide this money? And if not, where's it coming from?
So if the amounts that are allocated under the grants poverty this year are in excess of what we anticipate to have from the deed transfer tax, there is money still in the reserve that we can withdraw to support these funds.
Which reserve?
There's a specific reserve set aside for the poverty. I believe it's $38,613 right now that we've carried forward from prior years. So there is funding available there. We estimated the deed transfer to come in 30,600, something like that this year, rather than the 50 it normally does because of COVID. But if we allocate these amounts and they're in excess of that 30,000, then we still have the money that's in the reserve, which is $38,613.
Again, I'm just looking for clarification as to where the money is going. And I would like, as Councillor McKenzie indicated, a little more detailed financial information as to how this donation or grant will impact their operation before I make a decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm the same way. I like to see more. They do great work, but we just can't take the money and throw it out the door. We have to be careful.
Yeah, I think I'm going to chime in here too. I completely agree with the deputy mayor's position about how fine a job they're doing, and we all kind of know that. But I do agree with the comments that they have to be accountable and provide us the necessary information that's needed to continue to receive funding on an annual basis. So I would support the $10,000, but at least get them on side with even going forward, not necessarily for this year, that they have to follow the necessary policies to account for where the money is going. So I think everybody's chimed in. So
Yep.
if we, I think most are very happy to set aside $10,000 for them on the proviso that they provide the necessary information. Is that kind of, everybody
Yep.
agree my reading on this?
Yeah, Dave McKenzie. Yeah, I agree 100%. Like I say, they have all those programs in place, so it should be easy for them to show us where their money's going. So, and I agree with Sheila. They're a great organization, and we all think the same thing. But we just have to be a little bit accountable for our money, because we all, especially being in business, you got to be accountable for our money. So, that's it.
Okay,
Okay,
Councillor
I'm good.
Byrne?
Just on Councillor McKenzie's comments, I just want to make sure that this doesn't end up being a download from the province if they're getting funding from community services or anything. And all of a sudden we're throwing $10,000 at them and it ends up next year, we'll end up at the same position as the library. In that, you know, oh, now community services decides we have to carry a part of the grant up or operational cost of that. So again, that's my request for more information, and I would like to see what their thoughts are on their funding protocols going forward.
Thank you. So is it fair to say that for now we can advise Shelley that she can pursue getting that information, but at least let them know that we've set aside $10,000 if they fulfill their obligations to provide information? Would that satisfy council?
I'm good with that, Dave McKenzie.
Terry, anyone against that approach?
So if I could just chime in, so satisfy
Yes.
in what way? Satisfy in what way? What is it we're asking them to satisfy, Shelley? Is it
Provide their
the-
financials so that we know that the money is being appropriately utilized and not in conflict with other funding that they're getting, as Councillor Byrne alluded to?
They already provide their financials.
They have provided the financials.
Oh, okay.
But I will prepare information on, get more detailed information and prepare a memo for council.
Okay,
given
Fair
the-
enough.
And I'm not hearing anybody against the idea of $10,000, that they're a deserving organization, as Deputy Mayor Christie has pointed out. No, nobody's disputing that at all.
Your worship, Councilor
Councillor
Jones,
Jones,
just to clarify for me, in their request for finance and support for this year, $10,000, they say to secure and develop a designated use space. That's what they're going to use that 10,000 this year for, along with the 7,000 from last year.
That is what it says in the application.
Yeah, okay. That's what I'm kind of hung up. You got $17,000 now to go towards the youth center, so, if that's what they're using it for. Okay, I can agree with that if that's what they're going to do with it.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Well, that's what their application says, then we have to go with that. So does anyone have a difficulty then with going along with that? So Shelley will bring back some more information, but the money will be available. Okay. Anything more on that point? Okay,
I'm good.
all right, thank you. Shelley, that's the end of your
The final
grants
one is,
organization?
no, the final one is the Nova Scotia Community College.
Oh,
So
right.
we made an agreement to fund $20,000 a year for 5 years.
What
This is
year
year
are we
4?
in now?
This is year 3,
3.
Three. Okay.
I believe. I believe it
Well,
was the
that's
first year I
already
was
a
here.
decision that decision has been made. We have to meet that obligation.
Right.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have anything further on any of this to put forward or ask Shelley about? All right. Well, thank you. Our next agenda item, burning bylaw. And that would be, Mr. Harrod, you're going to bring this issue forward?
Well, actually, your worship, it says Mr. Harrod, but it's a
Councilor
memo
Byrne.
from Councillor Byrne. I don't know if we would change the name of the spelling of the burning bylaw if it were amended to BYRNING, but I'll
There
leave
you
it to
go.
Councillor Byrne.
All right. Well, I wondered why your name was there, but I went with what I was given. Councilor
go.
Byrne, you'd like to present your direction request.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the note says in the package, there's been several individuals contact me regarding the note of bylaw, C07 burning bylaw. It has been, the one on file indicates it was approved in 2002, and it doesn't make allowances for any change in technology that has occurred since then in the name of specifically outdoor propane fireplaces, propane heaters, or other methods of outdoor side applications that have appeared on the market since 2002. Given my research, I noticed that there are a significant number of screen room sun porches being built in Amherst, many of which are heated with some type of propane fireplace or heater with open flame. And in some instances, they had these large outdoor patio propane heaters used in commercial outdoor patios. There's also the issue of the chimenea type units, which many have in their backyard and are used in social gatherings. So basically what the people contacting me is looking for an update that would allow them to have some type of outdoor fire pit or fireplace that is can be utilized in today's environment. One gentleman suggested that as a means to offset, I guess, the inspections that will be required, that an annual permit be required to operate such a unit within your property. The fee, of course, will be established by the town or the fire department. So there is a considerable amount of interest in outdoor fire units. And I know there's the old tire with the wood in it, but there's also charcoal ones, propane, natural gas, etc. So I'm asking for some support to have, I would assume, the fire department do some kind of investigation and bring forward perhaps a revised burn bylaw. I realized that perhaps the one that went into effect back in 2002 was relative to the use of outside furnace, those outside furnaces, which memory serves me correctly, did create quite the amount of smoke in the town. But I think a chimney or a propane fireplace should be acceptable. And so I'm asking for some support to staff to investigate and perhaps update that bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Deputy Mayor Christie's hand up.
I'm totally on board with Councillor Byrne because this is something that I've been looking at for a while. And I'd like to ask Chief Jones if this is something that he has had an issue with, because even though the bylaw is there, there is quite a few actually not following the bylaw within the town. And, you know, given some of the circumstances right now and restrictions on where they can go, it would be nice if you felt it was safe to be able to have a backyard fire and a place to gather safely within your yard. I know, as we all do, that there are several all located within the town limits around our own homes, so they're operating already. And it might be better to update the bylaw and do it so that it's something that is current and something you can actually, you know, if somebody is following it with the proper up-to-date standards, that we could go ahead and make the changes and make that something that we could do for the residents of this town. So I guess I'm looking for some information from Chief Jones, but I would support Councilor Byrne's motion for staff to go ahead and get us some further information as well.
All right.
Your worship?
Chief Jones, please. Yes.
Yep. So just some information just for council and yourself. So over the last couple of years, last 5 years, we've had 126 calls or complaints related to folks burning outdoors. The unfortunate part is they keep popping up and we don't get notified, so we don't know they're there. But the biggest issue we're having, to be very honest, is we have folks that do light fires in their yards and they do not stay with them. The other issue we have is people are burning garbage and whatnot in their yard in plastic. It's not wood. The folks that are burning using the propane ones and natural gas, we're not having an issue with. But there are manufacturer instructions that need to be followed. And quite often, my folks for fire, when they go out and do enforcement on it, and also the police, the biggest issue we have, people are not following the actual manufacturing requirements for how far they have to be from a building. So one thing that comes up every time we talk about fire pits is CSA approval. There's a set standard there, and I apply that set standard. And I have no problem reviewing reviewing the bylaw.
Okay, so it's something that we certainly, there are issues that people are unaware of, but I would think it would be reasonable to have a look at the policy and bring it up to date. Any other comments here? I see Deputy Mayor's hand still up, or is that?
I'm sorry. Yes, no, he answered my question. Thank you.
All right.
Worship.
And Councillor Jones?
Yes, your worship. In the time I've been on council, I've had received phone calls of residents calling and complaining about the open fires. They complain about the nuisance, the smoke bothering their neighbors. Seems like the people, not everybody who has a fire pit in their yard are not responsible. Most of them are very good at what they do and how they do it, but there's a lot of them who are have no consideration for their neighbors. They burn noxious burning materials. They leave the fire untended. And if you look at some of, I come home one night and there was a gentleman, he had a big fire going in his driveway. No pit, just in the driveway. Nothing to put it out in case you got away from him. You know, if they burn proper material, we're like clean, dry firewood, it'll cut down on the smoke and all that. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of good people there who are responsible, but the ones who aren't responsible are the ones that makes the problems. And I know I have received phone calls, like I said. I have called the police a couple of times, but I was politely said, well, I'm not the person who's making the complaint. They have to call, and I call the individuals back and tell them that they have to call the police in order to make the complaint. Some will do and some don't. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, thank you. But certainly with the newer, more modern devices, I agree that with Councillor Byrne and Deputy Mayor Christie, it may be time to have a look at what can be safely and properly and appropriately used. And those who are breaking the bylaws, I mean, it's not going to affect them. They're going to do what they're going to do or get in trouble for doing it. So I guess Councilor Byrne made a motion and Deputy Mayor seconded. So to have
Your
staff. Yeah, sorry, Councilor Reinders, you had something?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
how you clean it up?
We have a burning bylaw in town now for when people burn fires, outdoor fires. There is a fine for it, so, but to come to the CA approval, most of it's all CA approval, the mosquito ones, propane, your barbecuing. I don't mind looking at it, but are we gonna take all the people's privacy away in the town? You know, we gotta be careful how we do that one. I don't mind doing the bylaw, but if the cops are called, there's a fine, and I just forget exactly, Greg might be able to remember. I can remember doing the bylaw.
What we're looking for.
That people burn stuff out.
Yeah, I think though what we're looking at here, that Councilor Byrne's suggestion is that we allow newer modern devices that are safe to be used. Nobody's saying we should not continue to prohibit open fires and burning garbage and the improper things that people complain about. It's simply not to penalize people who have a propane table in their gazebo kind of thing. So it's going to be looking at it from that perspective, I'm sure. And what's in the bylaw that is deemed improper will continue to be improper. But for now, it's really just asking the fire chief and to bring us information in an effort to try to modernize the existing bylaw. Councilor Byrne?
Yes, Your Worship. Just one, I believe the current bylaw refers that you can only have open flame where it's used to cook food, which basically means it's a barbecue. So other than that, if you can't cook food on it, you can't have it. So that's why I'm looking to have it modernized. As I say, it's most people have more than a barbecue on their, as you say, gazebo or sunroom.
Sure.
Yeah, no, Dave, and I do agree. Like we get all these new devices out now, and you know what, and this will make our people that have these devices, if we get all the information from our fire chief, and they'll make it safer for our people, and then we can have guidelines that will help everybody and be much safer. And I agree 100%.
Great. Chief Jones.
Well, Councilor Jones.
Sorry,
Which one?
Chief Jones.
All right,
Chief,
thank you.
Chief Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to point one thing out around fire safety, and I've heard it a couple times now, is using the fire devices under a canopy or a tent. That's not approved by code, so you cannot use it underneath a canopy or a tent or a structure that's built in your yard to be underneath of, particularly when it rains, and right in the manufacturer structures it spells that out. So I just want to caution folks to not do that. If you've ever seen a tent go up rather quickly, it does go very quick. And once a tent starts to catch fire and melt, unfortunately, folks will have a hard time getting away from it.
Well, thank you. You're obviously pointing out that there are rules, regulations that we need to be aware of, and simply trying to update and modernize the policy in the bylaw in an appropriate fashion is what we're requesting. So anything further on the request to get an update on the information on the motion made by Councilor Byrne? Then I will ask for a vote. Are there any nay votes? All right, thank you very much. We'll look forward to hearing back from Chief Jones. That takes us to item 3.1, tax reduction policy update. That's Shelley Rector, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. When we were talking about the community support area rate, this policy came up. So there was concern that the current policy may exclude access to the relief that the policy provides. For example, if a couple's only source of income was the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement. And so staff looked at trying to find a way to exclude it from the calculation for purposes of the policy, but that becomes somewhat problematic, given that it requires more verification on the part of the application process simply by providing a copy of the notice of assessment. So that's normally what we do, is we get a copy of the notice of assessment, but this would require additional information to be provided. So simply using line 15,000 now, it used to be 150, but 15,000 in the notice assessment is by far the most efficient means of verification. It's the easiest way for us to verify income. And so our current policy does not exclude any amounts and simply relies on line 150 or 15,000 now of the personal income tax return for verification. We did do a bit of a reach out to other municipalities. We have provided some supplemental information in the package for council. There were some exclusions, but most of them used net income. It wasn't specified in their policies, but I did reach out to a person who had recently done a request of municipalities, and most of the people he received information from indicated that they were using line 150 or 15,000 now. So the overriding concern that was expressed was anybody who has old age security and the guaranteed income supplement as the only sources of income would not qualify for the relief under this policy. And so we looked at the total income that a person will receive under old age security and the guaranteed income supplement for a couple, and that would be $27,962. I did provide in the package a couple of alternatives. One was moving to a tiered system, but I note that in 2017, council had a tiered system and then removed it in 2018. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that alternative. You do have the information in your package. The other one was looking at increasing the threshold amount. And so we looked at 5 different type of alternatives. So we could use our current threshold increase by CPI for 2019. We could look at our current threshold increase by CPI for 2018 because we didn't increase it in 2018. And then again for 2019. Using the GIS qualification income amount, but that's actually lower than our current amount. And then using the total income that a couple whose only source of income was the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement as a threshold, which was $28,000. And so we're recommending that the income in the policy, which is based on the total income line on the personal tax return, be increased to the $28,000. So we're going to still use line 15,000 in the tax return for the income verification, but we're recommending that we increase the threshold to 28,000. So we're asking that council forward the revised tax reduction policy to the next council meeting, which will increase that threshold to 28,000.
Deputy Mayor has her hand up.
Thanks, Shelley, for that. I think that gets us to where we need to be, recognizing the GIS on the income tax line could be hurting. So I think the 28,000 is a good solution, and that would still stay at $450 for the 28,000.
That's correct.
Yes, and do we have an idea of what that could increase that?
That's a
amount?
difficult one. Yeah, that's
Okay.
a difficult one to say. You know, we saw a big increase, a big uptake last year without a policy or without a threshold change, right? So we just had more people
Right.
applying. And so,
And if I recall, it was like between $19,000 and $20,000 this year. Is that correct?
that was the increase, I believe. Just
That was
give
the
me-
increase. Okay.
So
Okay.
right now, our tax reduction policy, yeah, we went from 29,700 to 42,000 this year.
Okay.
What we
Was
give
it,
out in
which
that.
is significant, but I mean, it's certainly putting our money where we say
That's
our
correct.
policies are and helping out the community.
correct.
So I definitely would be in favor. I know that Councillor Byrne was the one that brought this forward for that line. So I'm interested to hear what his comments are, but I think that this is a good compromise to the 28,000, which, you know, kind of talks to some of what his issues were as well.
All right, I see Councillor Byrne had his hand up next.
I just want to commend staff for the work they put into this. I know it's took a little bit of work, but it is, I guess, one of those keep it simple, stupid type of things where that what they proposed is simple, makes verification easy, and I think it addresses the poverty issue, which was one of my concerns in bringing this forward. So I want to thank staff for their input, and I certainly have no issue with raising the limit to 28,000. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor
Dave.
Jones.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'll come to you, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Jones, then Councillor McKenzie.
Yes, Your Worship. I agree with the policy as you have it. The only thing I take exception to is this tax reduction policy for the last 13 years has been changed every year except for 3. Is there not some way that we could have a policy where we're not going to change it every year? Thank you.
It's a nice thought. Councillor McKenzie.
No, I agree with a couple councils. Like I say, we should support this for sure. I just want to give my 2 cents.
All right. Are you looking for a motion then at this time?
Yes,
Shelley?
looking for a motion to take it forward to the next council meeting.
All right. Councillor Byrne, would you be interested in making that motion?
I will make a motion that we take the revised tax exemption policy to the next council meeting for discussion and hopefully approval.
I'll second.
Excellent. Any further discussion or questions? Then once again, I'll call for nay votes. Hearing none, motion is passed unanimously. Thank you. And our last item is our election 2020 update. Kim Jones, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So going to take a couple of minutes and roll through the memo here with you and then open it up for questions or discussion. But as you're aware, HRM has awarded the contract for alternative voting to IntelliVote. We're very pleased with this announcement. IntelliVote has a great deal of experience in conducting municipal elections in Nova Scotia, and we're familiar with them and very pleased with that. With the HRM proposal, other units, meaning us, are allowed to get the pricing that HRM is having. So again, that is a good deal for us. So immediately following the announcement, we reached out to IntelliVote and had some discussions with them. You also are aware that Minister Porter has announced that the October elections are going forward. So we're looking at our plans with COVID in mind. To be quite honest, I can tell you the only thing I know for certain is there will be an election in August, and that it will look unlike anything that we are accustomed to in the past. We're going to have to adapt.
October.
Are we having
No,
election in August?
October.
No, sorry, I mean October. It feels like it's August. Sorry about that. Let me get back on track here. So we have to think about things like social distancing and some of the restrictions that are in place. And we have to think a few months ahead. And it's becoming clear that a traditional paper election, as we're all familiar with, has many, many challenges. So I want to talk about those for a minute. And I also want to remind you that in 2018, we passed a bylaw to allow alternative voting in the town of Amherst. And at the time, council's intention was to do an extended advance poll by electronic means, meaning by internet or by telephone. And on election day, for the one day, would be paper only election. So that was the intention of council at the time that we looked at this bylaw. So COVID-19 has given us a lot of uncertainty. The minister has declared that there will be an election. However, he has not announced or doesn't appear to be prepared to announce any loosening of any of the requirements of the act. So we have to adapt. One of the main challenges I think that is a concern is physical distancing in polling stations. Obviously, we'll require larger tables and separation of staff and voters. It will definitely reduce the number of polling booths that can be accommodated within buildings. For example, a building, say like the Lions Den, that once could accommodate 6 booths might be 3 now, and maybe less depending on traffic flow and making sure that people come in one door and out the other. So the other point to that is many of our polling stations are community rentals, and we have no control over their opening or closing. So we have polling stations confirmed right now. In an expected second wave of COVID-19, they may not allow hundreds of people into their building on election day. Nursing homes is another issue that they're on lockdown now. We can't take a traditional mobile poll in there at the current time. Recruitment of election staff is another issue that all municipalities in our discussions are facing. I haven't gone and done a formal poll. I've bumped into a few of my regulars, and they're just not prepared right now to commit to work in October. It's, well, we'll wait and see if, things are still, quiet on the COVID, and yes, we'll work, but it's difficult to plan either way. PPE requirements, we would be looking at gloves and masks for staff and sanitizers and gloves for voters. And we've had Andrew Fisher has been working with me a bit, and we've been sort of preparing and getting orders in advance to stockpile some of the PPE requirements that we might have. And then there's the election supplies with the ballots and the voting booths and the touch surfaces that all are things that we've just never had to think about in other elections. So as I would like to discuss with council and recommend considering a fully electronic election for this year that would involve internet and telephone voting, both for the extended advance period right through to election day. I put some stats in my memo. There's 23 municipalities used electronic voting in the last election with no issues. Stats Canada reports that 99.2% of households have a landline or a cellular phone. We would be prepared to set up a couple of voting stations, one in Town Hall for sure, and possibly one over at the Business Innovation Center. Those are buildings that we can control, that we control the access to, and we're not dependent on community organization changing their mind at the last minute. And I will say that in the other municipal units, Truro and CBRM and Halifax that have done fully electronic, they've stated anecdotally that those public sites that allow public access are poorly attended. Most people will use their telephone or their computer in their own home and use the helpline for assistance. So I expect that there's going to be, a lot of questions, and I know we have a committee of the whole next week, Your Worship, and so we can have some discussion here today. But if people would like to email me some questions about this, we could provide a report back for the next week's committee of the whole.
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you for that. I mean, we are a little over for today. Deputy Mayor Christie, your hand's up?
Well, I can certainly email you my question. The only thing is I read somewhere that we might be looking at an extended voting time. Is that correct as well? If this happens or no?
We wouldn't go past October.
No, but I mean, opening it up
17th.
on the other side, like, okay.
We could
All right.
possibly go like a 10-day voting period. So we might open up the voting October 10th and run it right through to the 17th. Is that
Okay.
what you?
Yes, that's what I
Yes.
mean. And I think it's a great solution since you're already 99% there anyway with what we had passed in 2018. So any questions I have, I'll email them to you, but I think it's a great solution because we don't know what's coming at us. And,
Right.
you know, we would have to be prepared.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, by October, we could be into second wave COVID-19, couldn't we? All right, so we'll hear more at the regular committee of the whole meeting. So if there's nothing further, I see we're at the end of our agenda. I want to thank everyone for their input and participation, and I would seek a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Counselor Jones, so move.
And a seconder, please.
Second.
Counselor Reinders, thank you very much. If there's no objections, then meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.